ESPN.com boxing writer and television commentator Dan Rafael, a Clifton Park native as well. And Dan, I'm trying to figure this out. Floyd Mayweather was stripped of the WBO welterweight title. Is this the title that he won against Pacquiao that we all paid $100 for on pay-per-view, that he no longer owns the belt? What the what?
Well, sort of. It is. That is the belt that Pacquiao came into the ring with. He had that title. Mayweather, of course, won the fight, won the belt. Floyd came into the ring also holding two other sanctioning body welterweight titles that he retained in beating Manny Pacquiao. And on top of that, Floyd Mayweather also holds two of the titles at junior middleweight, which is the division above the welterweight division. So he came in with two belts of his own in that weight class. He won the third one. And because Mayweather elected not to follow certain rules that the WBO had laid out well ahead of time, this is not like a secret, they had no choice, frankly, but to follow the rules and to strip him of the title.
Dan, does this technically matter? Does this mean anything to his title? Is this like the NCAA vacating wins for a team? We still recognize that they're the champion?
Mayweather's the welterweight champion of the world. Doesn't matter if he holds one belt, two belts, three belts, four belts, whatever the initials of those organizations are. He is the welterweight champion of the world. He's beaten all the guys in that weight class, who mattered at the time, including Manny Pacquiao, who was the only guy out there that really had a claim to that title other than Floyd Mayweather, and they cleared it up in the ring. I'm a guy that likes to see matters settled between the ropes as opposed to in the boardroom and politics. So regardless of the fact that now Timothy Bradley Jr. holds the WBO title because they moved him up from the interim title that he had won the previous week, Mayweather's the welterweight champ. That's what fans need to know. It's not that complicated, frankly.
Well, Dan, the subplot that you're seeing kind of move around and you're hearing in the corner of a bar is he didn't pay $200,000, so they took the belt away. It's almost sounds like extortion when you hear novices talk about it.
Well, that's why they're novices. They're not studied in the situation, what goes on. Boxing is a business. Every single fighter that holds an organization's title pays what's called a sanction fee. It's usually a small percentage of their purse that goes towards the sanctioning of the event. It pays for things like, of course they make money, but it pays for the belt. It pays for things like the supervisors. It pays for some of the testing that gets done for the fights. There's a whole variety of things that money goes towards, including to their coffers. I'm not sitting here defending the sanctioning bodies, by no means. But the reason that they stripped him was because, A, if you're going to have a title, you got to pay for it. That's number one. That's like, if you go into the store and you pick up a product, you put it in your pocket, you walk out, they bust you for shoplifting. You got to pay for it. Number two, their rules for the WBO specifically, expressly state, without equivocating whatsoever, no doubt about it, you are not permitted as a boxer to hold world titles in multiple weight classes. The WBA and the WBC, who also recognize Floyd as their welterweight champion, also recognize him as their junior middleweight champion. Those two organizations have been, for the past couple of years, been breaking their own rules by allowing Mayweather to do that. So if they want to change the rules and allow it, I'm cool with that, no problem. But the WBO is not wanting to break their own rules. So they, in their rules, which I've read front to back, it clearly states that if you have won another belt in a different weight class, you have 10 days to make a decision on which one you want to keep. The WBO did Mayweather the solid. They were very nice to him. They were very cool with him. They gave him 2 months to make a decision, and he still would not comply with their ruling. Now, beyond all that, so here you have a guy that had two things. He had to, A, make a decision on which belts he wanted to keep, and B, he had to pay the sanction fee for the belt that they had, that he was fighting for against Pacquiao. But here's something else on top of that that's not really gotten a lot of attention. That is lost in translation here. When the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight was made, many of us didn't know this till after the fact because, frankly, they hid it. They lied. They kept it a secret. Mayweather was never going to fight for the WBO title in the first place. They just never really bothered to mention that. So if you go back and you watch the video of the fight and you see after the fight when Mayweather gets announced as the winner, he doesn't touch the WBO title. He doesn't hold it. He doesn't put it over his shoulder. He doesn't take a picture with it. Most guys, you win a world title, you throw it over your shoulder, you hold it up in the air, your team is all around you. I mean, you're excited and you're happy to have it. But he knew in the ring he wasn't accepting that belt. And therefore, when the deal was made and they went to pay him after the fight, for example, there's all kinds of deductions that come off of a boxer's paycheck. All kinds of different things, including sanctioning fees. Well, they weren't deducted on the night of the fight. So most of the time, if you were a fighter and you're winning and you're in a world championship fight, when you get your check, there's a deduction. You don't have to worry about writing a second check to pay for the sanction. But because Mayweather never was going to fight for that WBO title, they never deducted the money from his purse. Therefore, he still owes them $200,000. So he made a decision after the fact that he actually wanted that belt. And keep in mind also, at the post-fight press conference, Mayweather went on and on and on about how he was going to give up all of his belts because he wanted to allow all these great young, hungry fighters to fight for them. He'd been champ, going on, 17 years of his 19-year career, right. And it was time to let the new guys take over. So then he changed his mind, and again the WBO was like, okay, you know what, we're cool with that. Floyd, you're a great fighter. You won the fight in the ring. You deserve to have the belt. So here are the way you can comply with our rules. We'll be happy to make you a belt and send it to you. He didn't comply with that. So I understand where the layman comes from. They're like, man, $200,000 and he gets stripped of the belt because he didn't pay. I just outlined the reasons why. It's a little complicated, but it really isn't that complicated.
So he's still the WBO junior weight champion?
No, he is not any WBO champion at all.
Okay,
he
lost
has
all of them. Okay.
Belts in the WBA and the WBC, and the WBO has relieved him of the title for his failure to comply with their rules.
Okay.
ESPN.com.
And by the way, the WBO also says, though, they're still going to send him his belt. Oh. See, that's the common misperception that a lot of people have also. When you are a champion and you lose your title because you get beat in the ring, you physically get to keep the actual belt. They may give it to the guy that beat you in the ring that night so he can take the pictures and hold it over his head and bring it to the press conference and all that kind of stuff. But then somebody from the team goes to the other guy's side, gives it back to him, and maybe like a month or 6 weeks later, the organization makes him a belt and sends it to him. So you get to keep it as a trophy in your trophy case as a champion. So Mayweather, at some point in the near future, he will get a WBO title belt for his collection, which I'm actually a little surprised by because he still didn't pay the money for it. But they're going to do him the solid and send it to him anyway. He just withdrew the recognition of the title because he didn't comply with their rules.
Crazy stuff, man. ESPN.
Only in boxing, baby.
Absolutely. ESPN.com boxing writer and television commentator Dan Rafael with Armen and Levack at Dan Rafael ESPN on Twitter. Dan, have you seen a positive or a negative reaction to boxing as a whole since the Mayweather Pacquiao fight? Have you seen any difference?
Well, I will say that in the immediate aftermath of that fight, there was a lot of people that were very upset about just the fact that the fight, A, was so boring, and then they realized, oh my God, I paid $100 for that. And God forbid you're one of the people that paid thousands of dollars for a ticket. So there was definitely people that were down on it because of the disappointing nature of that fight. And I understand that. But you know what? There's been a lot of other good fights in boxing. The people that were disappointed by the outcome of Mayweather Pacquiao, I hear what they're saying, but I have to say, if you went to that fight or bought a pay-per-view for that fight expecting to see the greatest fight of your lifetime, you didn't do your homework ahead of time, because I think I was on your show before the fight. We talked about it. The fight basically went exactly how I thought it was going to go.
Yeah, it did.
Mayweather was going to box, and that's what he did. He boxed. He won a decision. Wasn't a surprise to me, so I wasn't personally that disappointed. But I know that there was a lot of casual people that hadn't watched a fight in a long time that did come away very bitterly disappointed, and I feel bad about that. But that's the buyer beware. You pay your money, you take your chances.
Yeah, you talk about the novice boxing fans, and the majority of them watching that fight was just that. And you're right, that's the reaction that we saw.
Yeah. Well, when you have 4.4 million people buy the pay-per-view, which is by far and away, more than double the previous record for a pay-per-view, of course there's going to be people that haven't watched a lot of boxing who come away disappointed. What I would suggest to those folks who, if they do feel upset by it, to try to put it out of their mind and to take advantage of a lot of the free boxing that is available on television, either on the networks or, if they have cable. Certainly there's a lot of good cable fights also. So, it's not everything is about a $100 pay-per-view not living up to expectations. If you take just a little bit of time, read a couple of my blogs, read a couple stories, go to some other boxing websites, you can find really good matchups, and boxing is littered with good fights.
Now, Dan, we have to, think about that next big one for Mayweather. What is next for Mayweather now?
Well, he says he's fighting September 12th. It will be the final fight of his 6-fight contract that he had with CBS Showtime that he has gone through now. The Pacquiao fight was fight number 5 of that agreement. He says he's going to fight September 12th, and then he says he plans to retire. Who he's going to fight on September 12th is still sort of a mystery. There's a few candidates, a few guys that have been mentioned here and there. Obviously, it will not be a rematch with Manny Pacquiao, if for no other reason because Pacquiao is still rehabilitating the shoulder injury that he suffered in the fight, or that he says was injured even before the fight. So he's out until probably the early part of next year at the earliest. So there's a few guys that names have come up, but there's nobody set for Mayweather's next fight. He just says that's when he's going, September 12th. So I would anticipate coming in the next Could be any time now. Could be, in the next, today, tomorrow, a week from now, sometime in the next week or so, 10 days maybe, we should hear some news about who Floyd intends to fight on September 12th.
ESPN boxing analyst Dan Rayfield, Clifton Park native with Armen and Levack, 104.5 The Team. Dan, you mentioned all the other great fights that happen all the time in boxing. This Saturday night, ESPN debuts Premier Boxing Champions. Tell me what it's about.
Well, Premier Boxing Champions is a series that was created by Al Heyman, who was the manager for Floyd Mayweather, and he has a huge stable of fighters, and they have made deals with a variety of networks, CBS, NBC, soon to come on Fox Sports 1. ESPN is also one of the networks that they made a deal with, and the first edition of Saturday night primetime boxing on ESPN is this weekend. I'm going to go to the fight on this weekend. It's on Saturday night in Tampa, Florida, and the main event is a young welterweight undefeated title holder named Keith Thurman taking on the former title holder Louis Collazo. Thurman, in my estimation and that of many, is one of the rising superstars in boxing, and definitely worth a watch.
Now, isn't he the guy? He's the one calling out Mayweather, right?
He has been calling out Mayweather, absolutely. He's been calling out Mayweather since even before he won his belt. Floyd's advisor, or the CEO of Floyd Mayweather's promotional company, Leonard Ellerby, actually told me this week, and I wrote a piece about it, that because I'm back up for a second. There was a lot of speculation that if Thurman beats Collazo, and he's the favorite to do so, and looked pretty good doing that, that maybe the reason that Mayweather hasn't announced his next opponent is because he was going to check things out Saturday night and see how Keith Thurman looked and maybe decide to fight him come September. But Leonard Ellerby put the kibosh on that, said, we're not fighting Keith Thurman, we got other stuff in mind. But be that as it may, Thurman still is one of the top young fighters in boxing. And, he's going home to have his first title fight in front of his hometown crowd. And, I don't know if it's the most competitive fight in the history of boxing, but I know Collazo is a tough guy, and I know that the local crowd there is going to be pumped up to see their hometown guy come home to defend his title for the first time. He hasn't fought in Tampa for several years, so it should be a very exciting atmosphere.
Good stuff. Dan Rayfield on Twitter, at Dan Rayfield ESPN. If you like boxing, he's a must-follow for you. Dan, the Clifton Park native. Dan, good catching up with you, man. Thanks so much for your time, and safe travels to you this weekend.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot.